Kingdom REI community and those who are watching on YouTube now, we got a YouTube channel, The Mission of Multifamily, so make sure you go check that out. Today, we are talking about, a controversial topic, which is debt. And guess what? This is not the Dave Ramsey show, so I can assure you, probably a lot what you have heard about debt. We are going to debunk that and really dive into it. So excited to get into debt today. And this podcast episode or I guess episode in general could also be called the Wealth Multiplier. And we're going to talk about why debt is a tool. It is a tool that the wealthy use to multiply their wealth, right? To leverage their wealth. In the last episode, we talked about OPM, other people's money. And debt is another form of other people's money that we can use, that the wealthy use to really leverage against their own money in order to build and grow wealth. Just remember this principle. If you really want to grow and build and multiply your money over time, you can't only use your own money, right? This isn't growing a business. This is investing in real estate, right? Like it takes other people's money. That's why I hate that the concept that, those who have done well in their lifetime are typically the greedy or the deceitful, because I just simply think that doesn't make sense. Because for you to get really wealthy, for you to really grow and build wealth, at some point someone has to trust you with money. They have to trust you with their resources. And so it has been my experience, and even in my own journey, as we build and grow trust and more people invest capital with us, and in the mentors that I have, they're actually people that are incredibly trustworthy, right? Because in order for them to have gotten where they are today, that means it has taken a lot of people who have looked at that person and said, you are worthy of my hard-earned resources, capital, to grow and multiply. And so it's how to get into to this topic today. Listen, let me bang on Dave Ramsey for a little bit. I don't think he's a fool. Actually, I think the guy's an absolute genius. He's an absolute business mogul. I mean, think about his audience for a minute. I mean, think about what Dave Ramsey has accomplished. Like if you were to sit down on a whiteboard and map out a business, and you were thinking, okay, who is my target audience, right? And you're thinking, okay, we're going to start a financial company and start giving financial advice, and who can start paying for our services? And you start drawing on the whiteboard, well, who's going to come? Is it middle class, or they got a little bit of money, right? Maybe they can pay for our programs. Then there's the wealthy, right, who definitely have a lot of margin, but maybe too busy. And then at the kind of the bottom is the people who are $100,000 in debt and have absolutely no margin to buy products, to invest in courses, etc. And Dave Ramsey has built a multi-million, maybe $1 billion company on helping or around helping those who are in massive debt. And so to say that this guy doesn't know what he's doing or talking about, I think is a little foolish, because the guy is brilliant in my mind. But I think it's worth pointing out. And Dave Ramsey has helped so many people get out of debt and help begin to kind of build basic financial principles, which, again, we know most people do not have. But I think it's really worth pointing out that Dave Ramsey serves those who have no understanding of finances, who the reason they are in the position that they are is because their financial education is so poor, and so they're in massive, massive debt. The idea of being able to borrow or use other people's money in order to grow and build and multiply wealth, they're not even close to that yet. And so who Dave Ramsey serves, his message is perfect for, because, again, they don't know the difference between good and bad debt, which we're going to talk about today. That's why their credit cards are maxed out, because when they think of debt, they think of credit cards. And so this gets me to my next point, the difference between good and bad debt. Because those who are in serious financial debt right now, they only use debt on liabilities, right? And what I want to talk about today, good debt, is using and borrowing money against assets that pay cash, that pay you cash. So real estate is one that we're going to talk about today, right? When we bought our duplex, yes, we borrowed $100K from a family investor, and we borrowed 75% from the bank. And the reason we did that is because, again, we were buying an asset that already had residents in here that were paying cash that could help cover the down payment, alongside of our the rent that we were paying back to ourselves. And we also mapped it out that if we were ever to move out of this duplex, that we could rent the side that we were living in, and essentially we actually had a surplus of cash coming in. And so the difference in good and bad debt is that those who the reason debt gets a bad name is because most people are using money to pay for liabilities, which only end up costing them more money. This is a credit card, right? I'm buying something, it's a commodity that really is not going to return anything back to me. Versus good debt is I'm buying something that's actually going to, I'm using money to get more money in return. And so I don't think I need to explain this concept too much. I want to really get into some other good stuff today, but I think it's important to understand this difference between good and bad debt. And really, I guess it comes down to two things. The interest rate and the timing of that loan, how long, how high and how long, but also probably more importantly, what you're using that debt for. That's the difference between good and bad debt. I mean, because heck, I know people who are buying single family houses on a credit card. And that's actually not a bad idea, especially now that you can get 0% interest on a credit card and do your fix and flip business plan in 12 months. So we won't get into that today. But again, I think that the difference between good and bad debt is actually what you're leveraging that debt for. So how can debt multiply your returns in your cash flow? I said earlier that another term for debt could also be called the wealth multiplier. And so I want to give you an example today of just how powerful this is, especially around real estate. And so, we said good debt is leveraging that in assets that pay you cash flow. And so let's say, for example, you were to buy a $100,000 property. Now, we're buying large commercial real estate, typically $5, $10, $15 million properties. But for the sake of this example, $100,000 property for cash. Okay, you're going to pay cash. You're not going to pay any debt. And let's just say in your market, it's going to go up 3% each year. So after the first year, your asset would have appreciated $3,000. That's 3% of $100K. And now you own the asset, so you get the depreciation expense, right? And you're getting the cash flow. Let's say if that was a rental property. But let's just say, on the other hand, you actually decide, I'm going to actually use debt like we did. We bought our first property and we borrowed money from this thing. And you used an 80% loan. Typically, the bank won't give you more than 80% leverage on your deal. That means your equity would increase $3,000 on your $20,000 investment, or 15%. And so let me just back up and explain that again. That means your equity, the equity you have in your deal. So in the other model, 3% appreciation, no debt, went up $3,000, right? This is not money in your pocket. This is just equity in your home that maybe you can refinance, or when you sell, you're going to get it back in your pocket. But if you were to use debt, now your equity would increase another $3,000, because now you only have $20,000 in the project. So it's 3% on $20K, right? Because you only have $20K in the deal. And so now, instead of a 3% return, you have a 15% return on your money. Now, the house appreciated the same amount, right? You're going to go to the bank and they're not going to say, well, oh, you borrowed debt, your house is worth more. It's not that your house appreciated more money. It's that you have less money in the deal, so that your capital, your cash, actually multiplied. You see the difference there? And so, actually using debt can be a wealth multiplier for you. And this will continue every single year the longer you hold on to the property. And not only that, you're paying down the loan. This is important. You're paying down the loan with other people's money as well, because you have renters paying down the debt for you. That's massive. And then the other thing, so yes, we're getting the percentage or the return on our investment is going up. But let's also talk about cash flow here for a second, and how this can increase by using debt. So same scenario, no debt. You have a $100,000 home. It's renting for $1,000 a month. It's pretty good. For example, let's just say you have, I'm working off a model here. You have operating expenses at $300 a month. You have a loan payment at $468. And so I'll do the math for you. But essentially, after you take all of those expenses, right? If you had no debt on this property, you would be cash flowing about $8,400 a year, right? $700 a month minus with your operating expenses, it comes out to $8,400 a year. That's an 8.4 return on your investment from cash flow if you bought it straight cash. Not bad return. Eight and a quarter, 8.4. That's pretty good. But if you were to borrow money on this deal, yes, you have to pay for a mortgage now, right? So your cash flow essentially is going down. So instead of getting $8,400 a year, now you have to pay a mortgage. So you're going to pay, let's say it's $6,000 now, 200 something bucks times 12. The returns are going to be lower with debt, but the return on your capital is going to be bigger. And so now, and the reason this is so important, because if you put all of your 100K into one property, yeah, you're making 8.4%. But what if you could take, now you just put 20 grand on debt. What if you took that 20 grand and bought 4 houses? The multiplier, right? And you had 80% debt on all of those, and now you were getting the cash flow on all 5 of those properties, and you were getting the equity appreciation on all 5 of those properties, because instead of putting all 100K into one property, you put 100K and you spread that over 5 properties, and you borrowed the rest of the money. This is the wealth multiplier, and this is why debt, for those who understand debt, can be such a powerful tool in really building and growing wealth. It's massive. And so I hope that makes sense for you. And maybe the question you're still having, and I want to wrap this up, is, but Ellis, I know debt's dangerous. And I've heard that, and maybe even as a Christian, you've heard that in your church. I don't want to owe money to anyone. Listen, debt is risky. There is a risk to using debt. I mean, we've seen that in the last financial crash where people borrowed a lot of money on their house. But let me help you understand the three things that we want to make sure that when we use debt on all of our properties. And it's really simply this. 1, cash flow. Do we have enough cash flow coming from the property? And is there a margin on that cash flow that even if cash flow was to go down, we still have enough cash flow to cover our debt when we buy a property? That's so important. So if you're buying a duplex, if you're buying your own rental properties, make sure you have enough cash flow to cover your mortgage, right? And a lot of people don't even rely on Airbnb income, because what if you can't Airbnb anymore, like COVID-19 hits, right? And you have to just put someone in that unit. Can you cover your debt? Cash flow is so important, right? Typically when we buy properties, we're buying them 90% plus occupied, meaning 90% of the units are rented. And it would have to take that vacancy going all the way down, or that occupancy going all the way down to 60% in order for us to start losing money or not being able to pay down our debt. That's massive, especially when these properties in never in their history have been below 60% occupancy. So cash flow is massive. The other thing is reserves. Always making sure you have reserves, enough reserves budgeted in your deal, or putting reserves away each month from the cash flow of the property when things get tight. And then lastly, long-term debt versus short-term debt. Listen, in 2008, 2009, when this whole thing happened, this whole bubble happened, one of the big reasons is because loans started getting called. People owned money and they had to pay that back and couldn't. And so one of the things that we make sure that we do in all of our properties is we look at our business plan, and we want to make sure we have enough time that if something was to go wrong, if values of the property start to go down, we want to give ourselves a runway. So say, hey, we don't need to sell this property right now, right? We got a 5-year business plan on this that we're projecting to sell this in 5 years, let's say. But we don't have to, because we have a 10-year loan on this deal. So in 5 years, if the economy is not in a place, or the market is not in a place that we don't think we should sell, then we don't have to. We're not forced to. We can hold on to that property for the 2-3 years to see the market come back up, and then be in a better financial position to sell. And so, listen, debt, yes, is dangerous, but it's only dangerous if you don't have those 3 things in place. I mean, walking outside your door is dangerous, right? But again, it's having a buffer. It's having margin. Those are the things that begin to minimize risk and really begin to help you use this as a tool to multiply your wealth over time. Listen, I hope this is helpful. I hope this makes sense. You can watch the video of this on YouTube, or again, we're doing this whole series. You can get every single video downloaded to uh, your email if you just go to the link below. I believe it's ellishammond.com/101. And if you want to learn about investing, head to ellishammond.com. I'm putting out a ton of good resources there, and excited to continue to get this to you. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope this was helpful. Leave me I'd love to share this on social media. Tag me on LinkedIn. Would love to hear just your thoughts and what you're learning about debt and how this might be different from what you learned growing up. We'll see you next week. Cheers.